What would be your tips in 2023 going into investing in pre-construction? Knowing now what we know about what's happened in the last 2 years, and I think I heard you say on one of the other podcasts you talked about basically buying futures in real estate, which I think is a really great way of putting it. But what would be your advice going forward to people who are looking to buy and invest in this type of property?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So first and foremost, and I say it all the time, but it's more true today than it was when I made that video, and that is buy into a developer before you buy into a development, right? It's very easy to buy into some sexy renderings that don't disclose that there's obstructing buildings, and to look at a Himalayan salt yoga room and go, this is really cool, I want to buy here. But when projects get canceled, it can sometimes take 3, 4, 5 years to get canceled, and you're going to get your deposit back. So the opportunity cost of that capital, right, is huge. And so pick developers that are either institutionally backed or have a really long track record of delivering on what they say they're going to deliver on, and make sure they have full approvals. Because if they don't have full approvals and it takes longer than they anticipate to get those full approvals, and there's volatility in construction costs between your purchase and those approvals, their profit margin can disappear. And that matters to you, because if they don't have profit margin, they can't build it, right? So be very careful who you're investing with. There's a lot of small companies that come up out of nowhere. They do a couple successful builds, and then the market eats them alive, right? It happens all the time in Toronto. So
I don't think people realize what they're doing when they're buying pre-construction, right? Because what they're doing is they're providing basically financing for the builder to go and get their financing, right? Because they have to do a certain number of sales before they're able to actually get the financing from the bank to build the place.
Yeah, you're like an LP. You're an investor in a development more than a specific unit, right?
That's an important distinction, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. I mean, you're part of the capital stack at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Who are the builders in your area that you like, that are the trusted ones? Because I know you've got a bunch that you work with that you're confident in.
Man, every time I answer this question, I get a text after the thing goes
You're gonna get in trouble on this one too.
You left us out, and it's
just say no comment.
I mean, there's a few that I like always promote everything they do, and they've never let me or my clients down. It's Tridel, Greywood, Diamante, Daniels is really good as well. Just some of those household names. I mean, Pinnacle's fantastic as well, because Pinnacle is one of those companies that, like, even if they don't hit their sales threshold, they're just going to start building anyways. They don't care. So yeah, those companies, right? Then there's some smaller, newer companies that are really good as well, or institutionally backed. You've got Slade and some others. So
when you say institutionally backed, what do you mean?
Just for Slate, for example, they don't have. Depending on the relationship a developer has with a lender, they can make different numbers work, right? So the benchmark is 15%, give or take. So your pro forma has to show 15% profit in order for you to get construction financing. Well, there are some developers who can go as low as 5 or 6% profit on a site and still get the same construction financing, and at more favorable rates because of the partners they have in the land, right? So a lot of the time, the land, it'll be a JV between them and like a pension fund, right? And so it's far easier for them to actually see that site through. They're backed by someone, because a lot of people don't think developers are like, especially on TikTok, you get this greedy developers worth billions of dollars. It's like, most of these guys don't have billions of dollars, right? They're just as leveraged as us, if not more sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you got to be careful that there's a little bit there's a little bit more backstopping there. There's a little bit more wiggle room, right? So Slate's one of those. There's a lot of good names.
And we got one of the tips. What are the other 6?
The other 6, review your floor plan carefully. So there's this new trend where, when you look at a floor plan and you have support columns, and they're always dark versus furniture is just outlines.
Yeah.
It's been a couple developers recently that has decided no longer are they going to color in the support columns. So it's just like a little round outline. So it looks like, if you're not paying attention or you just look at it quickly, or it's placed really well, you just think like, oh, that's like a little coffee table or an end table or something.
Meanwhile, it's
and
just a beam going right through your living room.
yeah.
Nice.
Wow.
It's
You
super
can hang stuff on it.
very frustrating to
kidding.
see that. So review your floor plans really carefully. Like there's more considerations than just that. Obviously, make sure you're not paying $1,700 a foot and 30% of your livable square footage is actually corridor space. Be very careful with that stuff. In the agreement of purchase and sale, always make sure you have a lawyer who specializes in pre-construction review the contract, particularly someone who does a lot of volume in pre-construction.
Hold on a second. Did a realtor just tell consumers to have a lawyer review the contract that they're going to get into with a builder? That is amazing. I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, groundbreaking stuff.
And on that note, I would say find a realtor that will tell you to go to a lawyer when you've got a purchase contract that they aren't 100% familiar with and that a builder is in complete control of. That is probably the single best piece of advice I've heard from a realtor in quite some time. Thank you.
No kidding.
It seems so elementary, but you would be shocked by the amount of people who call me on closing who didn't use me when they purchased, who didn't have their contract reviewed by a lawyer. Like, just sign the agreement of purchase and sale. You're given 10 calendar days by law specifically to have it reviewed by a lawyer, and you did nothing during those 10 days.
Wow.
Well, and what amazes me is the number of real estate agents that in my market, I'm not talking about your market, that will go to a builder and they'll sign somebody up and say, here, I'm introducing you. And then they're like hands off of the process, deal with the salesperson. I'm like, well, that salesperson doesn't represent you. They represent the builder. Yeah. And you're going to sign a contract that the realtor hasn't reviewed, a lawyer hasn't reviewed, and might have something like a clause in it that says you can't publicly market it for sale if you need to, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a big part of it too. Just like using somebody who specializes in pre-construction. You should be able to say to your if your realtor calls themselves a pre-construction specialist, and you say to them, okay, I'm really interested in this unit, in this sort of floor range, faces south. Is there anything I need to know about? And they can't immediately tell you, yeah, the parking lot 2 streets down to your south on this corner, it has a plan submitted but not approved with the city for 37 stories. Like, some people think it's crazy that I think everybody on my team should be able to just off the top of their head instantly know every corner, what it's zoned for, what. But to me, that's just like, that's your job.
Absolutely.
Right? We get paid incredibly well. Like, I don't think that's asking too much. I really don't.
Totally.
To be able to just say to a client with certainty, like, hey, you need to be aware that that view may be clear today, but in the next 5, 10, 15 years, it may not be clear because of this thing that potentially is coming up on this corner, right? Because the amount of people who have come to me and told me that they were sold a clear south view, a forever lake view, and it got blocked 10 years later. It's fascinating how many people get sold this stuff, and
Yeah, unless you're right on the water, it's almost bound to happen at some point. Hey,
yeah,
I mean, that's a fair assumption too.
Yeah,
it's funny because that happens a lot in single family homes too, where this green space behind us is always going to be green space. Wrong.
It's like, we just haven't been able to get the landowners sell that plot yet.
Yeah, if it doesn't have that park status on it, it can go.
Yeah.
Unless you live right on the ocean and you've got a house that you can, with a yard right to the shoreline, right, Greg?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to build in front of me, that's for sure.
No. We're going to build a bunch of float homes in front of your house, Dad. Low income, rental only float homes.
I saw an article this week about that in Ontario. They're calling them lake squatters. They're just float homes that they're parking in the middle of the lake, and like, that's brilliant.
Just
we're going to
drop anchor and you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Wow.
We have a homeless guy. Well, he's not homeless anymore. So there you go. We have a guy who the community, he was hanging around where I live in Toronto called Humber Bay a lot. Community came together with a GoFundMe, raised him like $8,000. He bought a sailboat. Now he lives on the sailboat with his 4 dogs right in our bay.
Wow.
He's always out there. And if you ask him, hey, like, can you teach me how to sail? He'll take you out for an hour for free. It's remarkable. Great guy.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Incredible. Okay, so we've got some really good stuff here. Invest in the developer. Have a realtor that suggests that you have a legal contract reviewed by a lawyer. What's next? What else?
What else? Quantify the premium you're paying. So quantify it.
Okay.
Put the number on a piece of paper and stare at it and say, am I okay overpaying by this much?
Right.
And how you do that is you take your unit and you find an apples to apples comparison. So, in the same block, a building that's only 1 or 2 years old, comparable in fit and finish, you find yourself a unit that's similar to yours. Figure out what your unit is actually worth if it existed today in today's current market. Quantify the difference in price. Is it 50? Is it 150? Whatever it is, figure out the number that you're paying and decide if you're willing to make that jump, right? Because a lot of people will say to me, oh, like these are the prices, and they'll quantify it or rationalize it by saying, oh, the developer's just charging what it's going to be worth in the future. I'm like, well, developers aren't these omnipotent gods who know where the market's going to be in 5 years. So that's not exactly how this works.
You mean they don't have a crystal ball that
right?
Just like tells them information on a regular basis? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like they're just pricing based on cost. They don't really care. Of course, they do care. They hope the market goes up so that everybody can close on their properties. But you know what I mean? Like, that's not how these pricing models get cooked up. So quantify it and decide if that's reasonable to you. And if you're going to, for the love of God, if you're going to rent it out, if it's going to be an investment property, maybe don't do a 4-page pro forma, but run the basic numbers or have your realtor run the basic numbers and use reasonable assumptions. 2% rental inflation, 3% rental inflation. Okay. Use reasonable, like, don't put in your pro forma interest rates are going to be 1.5% in 2028. Like, reasonable assumptions.